Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. Classic World of Warcraft has been an amazing boon for a lot of people and an awesome experience. It's a game that a lot of people have been waiting for a very long time, and it's also super nostalgic to so many people. But Classic World of Warcraft isn't for everybody. Some people that have tried Classic in 2019 tried it to really get sucked in, and it just didn't quite do it for them. You might be one of those people, standing out there, watching everybody else have fun, wishing that was you, wishing you were enjoying it as much as everybody, to the point where you're just not quite jiving with Classic, to the point where you even go back to retail. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you. Many people feel this way. I wouldn't know exactly how many, but for example, last time I asked the question, what do you prefer, retail or Classic? I actually got a lot of people telling me retail. I did phrase my question in an interesting way. Would you rather have Classic World of Warcraft as it is, or would you rather do an expansion akin to Legion, just about a new patch because Legion was amazing, or maybe something like BFA patch 8.2, not the boring early parts? And I found out that at least in my community, a lot of people, while they do like Classic and are fine playing Classic, they do prefer, if you have to choose one or the other, more akin to retail. Classic World of Warcraft is a game that's completely different to the current WoW, and a lot of people picked up habits that current WoW has, which are not bad habits, but they really do clash with the old school design philosophy that is with Classic. Therefore, some people might be really trying to get into Classic, really giving it a go, but might not be really getting sucked into it as much as others. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys some tips in order to try to see if you can enjoy Classic World of Warcraft a little bit more compared to how the experience has been for some of you right now. Before we go into our tips, we do have to establish something. Classic World of Warcraft is a completely different beast to the current game. The philosophy is different, what is expected out of players is different, the leveling experience, the class design, everything about the game is different, to the point where it might as well feel like a whole nother game. And because you have an approach of Classic WoW versus retail as a whole nother game, it might make it a little bit easier for you to figure out some of the concepts I'll be talking about in this video. Tip number one, but more or less a band-aid tip, is to play with a friend. Yes, leveling World of Warcraft is kind of boring when you're by yourself, but anything you're doing in just about any game is a lot more fun with a friend nearby, that is if you have one. Classic World of Warcraft is another one of those games, but honestly this kind of tip can be applied to just about any other game. If you can somehow find a way to sync your schedules with a friend and level together, mobs become a lot easier to deal with, questing becomes a lot less challenging, and it's going to be a lot less grindy, and even the boring parts of just running from A to B when there's nothing to do, having a bit of banter on the side can definitely help you pass the time. But then again, this isn't really a real solution, it's more of a band-aid. Playing anything with a friend, even the worst game in the world, is a lot more fun. This is why I don't really count this one as a real solution, simply because it could just be applied to just about any game. I guess tip number two, or a real tip, would be to treat this game slightly differently, maybe akin to the way the Blizzard developers back in the day treated it. Now, World of Warcraft Vanilla back in the day tried to really implement an RPG element to it. It tried to emulate it as best as you can. The best example I have for you is Skyrim. If you've ever played Skyrim or Oblivion or any of the Elder Scrolls games, then you would know exactly how they go. You're thrown into a world and it's a sandbox. There's just about anything you can do. You can pick up any quest, fight any enemy, you can grow stronger as your character. There's so many interactions with so many NPCs, so many things to find hidden in caves and in dwells and in dungeons and in castles. There's so much to explore everywhere in the game, every nook and cranny, and just about everything is interesting. World of Warcraft Vanilla back in the day tried to emulate the early concepts of what is making up an RPG, but for back in the day, 2004, so it is going to be slightly different and not as refined or graphically as amazing, but it still does hold up to be an RPG. It really tried to be an RPG with a multiplayer element. Because of this design philosophy, you can actually kind of try to treat the game as such, compared to retail, which is looking at the meta, it's looking at the end game, it's looking at what is it to do after the grind. Instead, treat Classic World of Warcraft as an RPG experience from the start to the end with a level system. Leveling Classic is part of the content. It is part of what you're supposed to do. It is part of what you're supposed to experience. So treat it as such. Because in Skyrim, there's no end game. You're not just trying to grind until level 20 and then you could do the final quest. No, every single quest, every single bit of content you do as your character levels up over time That's part of the journey, part of the experience. So if you can try to apply that to Classic, that'll probably be the best way for you to understand where the developers were coming from back in the day. You can even try to make your sessions whenever you're playing Classic a little bit more immersive. You can try a lot of things from, let's say, turning on sound. A lot of people play World of Warcraft without any sound or music, but just adding a little bit of that to your gameplay sessions could be a little bit more immersive. You can also try to change the camera distance. Maybe you zoom in a little bit so you can see the details of the world rather than fully zoomed out for the functionality aspect. You can even use an add-on called Immersion to help you parse the quest text a little bit better so you can have yourself more of this old school-ish RPG experience. And by God, do your class quests. Every single time you do a class quest, there's probably so much work and so much effort put into the class quest. The RPG element definitely shines through it. Definitely do your class quests whenever they're available at different level intervals. Next, let's talk about tip number 2, the leveling. In Classic World of Warcraft, leveling is leveling. It's leveling like in any other game, and it can definitely get boring at times. Maybe you're someone who plays Paladin on retail, and for Red Pally, cleaving through mobs and using Templar's Verdict over and over to get through all the enemies, whether it's AoE packs or single target, is never really an issue, and you don't feel like you're ever slower than any of the other classes. But as soon as you hop on Classic thinking, well, I play retail Paladin, I might as well play Classic Paladin as well, and you might be feeling super jarred by the difficulty and the change of leveling systems. There's a difficulty set to every single class that it is in Classic, how fast some of them level, how much easier time do they have than others in leveling, and you really should try to choose the leveling speed that's up to you. Maybe as a Paladin in BFA, you're able to clap through mobs super easily, but maybe in Classic, a Hunter might be something you might want to start with to have yourself an easier experience so you can just cruise through everything. Maybe you want a more difficult experience, maybe just auto-attacking a mob aimlessly over and over and then killing them after like 20 seconds per mob is just too boring for you. Maybe you want something more hardcore, something more dedicated. So you can of course choose some of the harder classes to level like a warrior or a rogue that take a little bit more of attention span in order to really get through every single combat in every single situation. Just because you play an X class on retail does not mean you should have to play a certain class on Classic. You might have to adjust your leveling difficulty by changing your whole class in order to have a more pleasant experience. Trust me, for a lot of people, that can be enough in order to go from not really feeling like Classic to really starting to enjoy a quality experience. Tip number 3, group content. It does sound a lot like, hey, play with friends, but trust me, this one is going to be slightly different. Questing solo can get a little bit lonely and a little bit boring, and you always want to break up the monotony from time to time. Normally on retail you would pop into LFG and maybe do a dungeon, but trust me when I say this, on Classic, go to your city, go to one of the capitals, and try to see if you can find yourself a dungeon group from time to time. After about 1 billion of kill 20 of these and collect 10 of these quests, you do get bored and you do want to break up the monotony of it all. Questing is not super engaging, but doing dungeons, however, is. So really do take the time out of your day, and even if that means you have to fly all over the world just to go back to Stormwind, find a group, run all the way to Normagon, wait for 15 minutes for everybody to get there. If you have the time and the patience to get the whole group together, it is definitely going to be worth it. One of my favorite parts about Classic has been any kind of group content, particularly the challenging group content. If we're faced with mobs that are higher level than us, that dodge most of our abilities, or bosses that are way higher levels than us that actually are deadly, this is where most of the fun for me is. Although some people would want a easier dungeon to do, completely understandable, whatever is your speed, man. Taking the time out of your daily questing in order to do some group content is definitely healthy. It is a lot more fun, you do get some great loot, or at least a chance at it, and you might be able to make a couple friends on the server. Tip number 4, I would say get yourself some sort of an add-on in order to help you level, or any sort of guide in order to make it easier. Now, Classic World of Warcraft pathing for the levels can be a bit frustrating. Sometimes you'll have to go inside of a cave to kill 20 mobs, come back from the cave back to town, then turn in the quest and have the quest giver give you a new one, a new quest to go back into the same cave just so you can loot a box that's sitting way in the back in the corner. If you played any bit of Classic, you will know exactly what I mean. A lot of the design philosophy for the quests back in the day were simply not convenient. They were kind of all over the place and smattered all over the place, and you had to run back and forth in a lot of cases. And while that's never really all that fun, it is simply just how things were back then. Running around aimlessly through Classic can also get very frustrating because you never really know exactly where you're supposed to go, while in retail they really do try to help you out and tell you some of the areas where you could quest in next, and with the scaling technology letting you quest just about anywhere at this point. In Classic, unless you know exactly the path that you have to take, it can definitely be frustrating, confusing, and some people might even give up early on. Getting some sort of an add-on to help you at least know where to go, at least point you in a decent direction, is advisable. There are a lot of add-ons like this. The one I like is Azeroth Autopilot. It is free. You also can go for some of the more experienced guides that are locked behind a paywall. But Joanna is an old school vanilla WoW player that has a bunch of guides for a bunch of classes from different starting zones, and they're actually some decent guides. You can get a free version of every guide up until level 12 for any class, but if you want to get a real full thing, you will have to pay some money. But having some sort of a guide in order to make the Classic questing a bit more structured is advisable. It definitely helps make the experience a little bit easier and makes it feel a little bit less overwhelming. And a final tip, you can also change the goal of Classic World of Warcraft. You see, normally with retail WoW, we have a goal of getting to max level so then you can enjoy the end game content. But what if you were to change the way you look at Classic WoW? What is the purpose of getting to level 60 in Classic World of Warcraft? So you can do the dungeons, so you can do the raids, so you can do some end game PvP, maybe. But you don't really have the same drive of the brand new things that are coming out. Classic is a game that has been played before. Most of the bosses in dungeons and raids have been defeated by a variety of players, so you can't really go for a world first. You don't really have new patches for Classic either. You're not going to be expecting a new dungeon or a new raid to check out at a later time. So you could always just, while playing Classic WoW, instead of focusing on level 60, make some goals while you're low level, while you're questing. Simple things like making gold. For example, I've been getting really lucky with a couple of greens that have been dropping left and right. Also, skinning has allowed me to sell a lot of my skins and leathers on the auction house, and playing the auction house, making a little bit of gold while I'm at it, has been more fun than even questing in some cases. While you're questing and maybe you're playing a leveling build that you find very, very boring, try to come up with your own leveling build. Yeah, you might be making some mistakes here and there. Your build might not be perfect, but it might be a more fun and enjoyable way for you to play. It could be an easier way to play, it could be a more challenging way to play, but at least having a way that you enjoy the game in your own way can be more enjoyable in the long run. If you're someone who is finding leveling very boring, try to work on professions while you're working on leveling. It is something that allows you to kind of keep working while you're working for stuff and keep your mind off of just questing and grinding mobs, but focusing on multiple different things and really developing your character in more than one field. This can have a big payoff if you do want to make a profession that does make you gold on the auction house at a later time. Maybe you're someone who plays on a PvP server. Take the time out of your busy day questing to just go gank some people in PvP. Just find something fun to do to break up the monotony that would be the leveling in Classic WoW. In the end, there are a lot of ways for you to find ways to enjoy Classic World of Warcraft, and even in the end, after using every single one of these tips, it might not be enough for you. But hopefully this video gave you guys at least a couple of ideas of what you can do to try to see if you can give Classic another go. Again, this game, Classic World of Warcraft, is not going to be for everybody. So if you're going to give Classic a go and you're just not finding it up to your standards, not really finding it to suit what you want out of a game, it's perfectly fine. However, if you do find some great joy in the game, that's awesome. There's a lot of people that are playing Classic, and you'll be able to have some great experiences with all those people. The Classic release has definitely turned a lot of people on their heads, and now it's trying to figure out whether they hated retail and really were thinking Classic was going to be an amazing thing, or maybe whatever expectations they built up for Classic from the long wait are just not really being quite met. For sure, I definitely found myself in that similar situation. This is why on my rogue I decided to play a Hemo backstab build in a hybrid way so that I can have more fun than spamming Sinister Strike and have more common points. I also do a lot of dungeons. I generally don't level solo. It's a lot more fun with another person. And just about every single mob that I see, I'm trying to skin them and sell those skins on the auction house to make a little bit of gold so that I might be able to forge some weapons on the auction house, maybe some first level blues in the AH, as well as my very first mount. Maybe I'll be able to pay for it by the time I'm at level 40. So I've definitely been using a lot of these tips, and I found the game a lot more enjoyable in that way. So hopefully you guys find these tips useful as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this is such a long video, but there was a lot from me that I needed to cover and a lot that I needed to say. But thank you all so much for checking it out. Hope you find this video somewhat helpful, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.